It's time for Floyd Mayweather Jr. versus Conor McGregor. I'm Teekosey, and this is with just 15 defeats. Teekosey here, back once again with another round of with just 15 defeats. In today's show, we're switching it up, something slightly different. We're going to be talking about Floyd Mayweather Jr. versus Conor McGregor. So if you're new to the channel, I just want to say, if you like heavyweight boxing, check out the channel. There's a lot of content in there. Click subscribe. And if you like this video in particular, I want to hear from you. I want to hear what you've got to say on what I have debated. Give me a thumbs up, and in the top right hand corner we're going to have a little poll popping up, and I really appreciate it if you could get involved and take part. Stays within YouTube, just click yes or no. So as I say, this is something that's been playing on my mind for quite a while since it cropped up. People started talking about it. So I just wanted to kind of sidestep the whole heavyweight boxing just for this one video and discuss it. Now, first of all, I say I've been watching UFC for over 10 years. I am a huge fan of the UFC, huge fan of MMA. And as I say, I've been watching it since about 2005, 2006. When I was searching the internet in search of videos, boxing videos, and on one of the websites that we all go on, I found some UFC videos. I started watching them. I got obsessed with it, and I started binge watching UFC from the very beginning, from UFC 1, where it all began with that strange competition that was brought together a wide variety of single skilled fighters fighting in pretty much a competition that had zero rules, no time. There was a referee. I'm pretty sure it was Big John McCarthy was the referee from the start, but there wasn't really a time limit, and that's why over the course of time rules evolved, and obviously it became a lot safer, and it's become a fantastic sport. But as I say, I binge watched it from the start. So I watched all of the main card shows. They're numbered: UFC 1, UFC 2, blah blah blah, until that date, and then I've carried on watching it ever since. So I've watched a lot of UFC in the past. So I'm not just someone who's jumped on a bandwagon, got excited by Conor McGregor because he's become a celebrity. I kind of know the sport, I understand it, and I genuinely do appreciate it. A lot of people I've spoken in the past to, they don't quite get it. They think it's they don't appreciate the sport, the skill, the fact that all the elements come together. They think it's dangerous. And they think that people are getting injured all the time. They think it's no holds barred, all that nonsense. Okay, and I can remember years ago now, probably about seven years ago, I was talking to someone in a pub who was a boxing fan, and I was talking to them about the UFC because at the time I was really into the UFC. I was just kind of, as I said, I was binge watching everything I could find in those sort of years, and I was talking to someone about it, and they kind of had the opinion that I just spoke about, the fact that they just thought it wasn't anywhere near as good as boxing, that it was dangerous, like etc. And they just said, look, boxing's so much better, blah blah blah. And I said, look, they're two different sports, and that's the way I always think about UFC, MMA. It's a completely different sport. And the way that I tried to explain it to him was that if you had a British football team and you had a rugby team, they're completely different sports. And if you put them on the same field, then you think those two sports, they're team sports. They're played on a field. They have the same amount of people, I think. That in theory, they have a ball, they pass, and they try to score at each end. Right? But they're completely different. Now, Manchester United, if the Manchester United played some rugby team, sorry, I don't follow rugby, but I'm just making this comparison. They would not, and they played a specific game. The football team's going to win, the rugby team's going to win, right? And you can make this comparison about a lot of things, like American football. If an American football team played a rugby team, they're two different sports. If a tennis player played a badminton player. So you've got all these things. It's completely different. And that's what I tried to explain to this guy. And I think it's a real fair example. The problem with the boxing and the MMA comparison that people get hung up on is the fact that they're both punching. They both punch each other. That's where I think people think that they can make a clear comparison and they can say one is better than the other or someone would beat someone else because they're both punching each other. But for me, there's a clear distinction. And some years back, we saw a boxer fight an MMA fighter, and that was Randy Couture versus James Toney. I think this was like 5 years ago. 4 or 5 years ago. Absolutely terrible fight. We knew, and it was fought under MMA rules in the UFC, so we knew that Randy Couture was going to win that. It was no surprise to anyone. And I always remember the commentator, Joe Rogan, he kind of, as soon as the fight was over, he said, what we learned in UFC 1 still applies. And that's something that's kind of stayed in my brain. Always, it's one of the pretty much the only UFC quote I can ever remember. The only quote about MMA, about UFC that I can ever remember. And I think he was basically saying that when you're allowed to use all the skills, you're always going to be able to beat someone who has a limited skill set. And that's pretty much what happened. So if we talk exclusively about Floyd Mayweather Jr. fighting Conor McGregor, I think there's like five main points. 5 main points that are worth talking about. Firstly, this fight is only ever going to be made, on boxing rules. It's going to be a boxing match under boxing rules. They're never going to do it in a UFC MMA fight because it just would never happen, because Floyd Mayweather would never have a chance of winning that fight. He would never, ever have a chance of winning that fight. That's a one-sided fight that Conor McGregor wins handsomely. It's not even a competition, right? So as it's a boxing match, it's a complete. When you compare it to the UFC, we're talking about probably 12 3-minute rounds as opposed to 3 or 5 5-minute rounds. We're in a ring as opposed to an octagon, and also the referees have a completely different mindset. Now, in the UFC, the referees stop fights very, very quickly. They want to avoid injuries, and I think it's primarily because people get taken down, they get knocked down, and then fighters are allowed to then jump on their opponent and beat the hell out of them. Whereas in boxing, that don't happen. Referees let fights go on longer, but they're quicker to break fights up. Obviously, if someone gets knocked down, that's it. Knocked down, the guy's allowed to get to his feet, he's got a count, all that sort of business. So it's a completely different setup, and it'll be interesting to see how Conor McGregor can adapt to that. See, that's not even about. I'm not even talking about fighting styles. We're talking about the duration of rounds and fights, where it's taking place, and how the referee interacts. Right? Then, if you talk about how Conor McGregor would have to adapt his own style. Now, Conor McGregor, he's a bit of his style has evolved over the years, but he is an all-action fighter. He fights with a lot of front kicks, head kicks, bicycle kicks, swivel kicks. There's a lot of kicks, and he does not just use that as his offense. He uses it as a defense and also to create space. Now, in a boxing match, he doesn't have that. He does not have that on his arsenal. So that completely changes his mindset. So that there's a lot there. There's a lot to consider. So the next point is Mayweather's experience. Mayweather's experience. Now, Conor McGregor became a pro MMA fighter in 2008. By 2008, Floyd Mayweather Jr. had been a world champion boxer for 10 years. 10 years. Just think about that. So when Conor McGregor was fighting some nobody in his home country, Floyd Mayweather was topping the bill as a world champion, and he'd been a world champion for 10 years, right? Now, also, when we're talking about Floyd Mayweather's experience, there's the issue of rounds. Floyd Mayweather has had a lot of rounds. In the last 10 years, he's fought about 14, 15 times, I think. He's only stopped 2 guys. He's only stopped 2 guys. So he's gone 150 rounds, 160, 170 rounds, whatever it works out to be. So there's a lot of rounds there. There's a lot of rounds of experience, a lot of rounds where he's been on top, where he's obviously been able to perfect his craft year after year after year. So that is an interesting point. But moving on to the third point, which is associated with this second point, Mayweather's age. He's 39 years old. Now, if this fight is to take place this year, Mayweather will be 39 years old. Be 39 years old. Now, we've seen him in the last few years beat some fantastic guys. We've seen him fight some fantastic guys in the last couple of years. Manny Pacquiao, Maidana, Saul Alvarez, who is the middleweight champion, Cotto, Mosley, Marquez, Hatton, blah blah. All these, going back a little bit further there with Hatton, but the years are catching up with him. The years have got to be catching up with him. No one can stay amazing forever. So those reflexes, those defensive skills that have meant that Floyd Mayweather's been dubbed this defensive genius, they are eroding over time. And to be honest, I felt that I saw them eroding in the Maidana fights that we saw a couple of years ago. So that's a couple of years ago. The first one was about 2 years ago. The rematch was a little bit shorter, right? And I felt that those skills were eroding. Maidana did land. He got in close, and Mayweather won it with the more superior skills and technique and cleaner shots and dominance. But Maidana was able to capitalize occasionally, and he won some of those rounds in those fights. Again with the Pacquiao fight. Now the Pacquiao fight was a disappointment, but Pacquiao won a couple of those rounds, and Pacquiao has his excuses, and whether that's true or not, again, we never know. When guys come out with all these excuses, we never know really if that was a genuine differential in that fight. Now, Mayweather Pacquiao said he had a shoulder injury or something, and if he'd been 100% and we got a true fight, maybe Pacquiao would have been a much better fighter. And that's kind of like, when I was trying to think of guys that could be in some way comparable to what Conor McGregor might be able to, or the problems that Conor McGregor would pose to Floyd Mayweather. Pacquiao was pretty much the only guy. Like a lot of the guys that Mayweather's fought in the last 10 years, they haven't been particularly dynamic. They've been skillful guys. Some of them have been hard hitting, but a lot of them are plodders, fairly technical boxers. They're not buzzing around the ring. They're not going to be changing levels. So the Pacquiao was the one, the pretty much the only fighter you can kind of pull out there that offers a very small percentage of a similarity, because Conor McGregor's very, very quick, and he's very unpredictable. He's going to be shooting from different levels, firing different types of punches. So that is something to think about, and because of Mayweather's age, that's where that comes into play. That's where it comes into play, the age, and whether the lightning quick reflexes, the defensive skills, all these things that Mayweather's kind of mastered, because he has mastered them. Not many boxers out there master the skills. They become good at it. They become decent at something. Sometimes they have a natural intuition or natural ability to do something. But Floyd Mayweather has mastered. He's mastered these skills, and that's the difference, right? And it all depends on whether these skills have eroded, right? So the next point, which is the fourth point, is Conor McGregor's confidence. This is one of the important factors of this whole battle, right? And that could be, it's a positive and a negative. And I'm talking about his confidence in the fight, because from what I've seen of Conor McGregor, now Conor McGregor kind of came pretty much out of nowhere in terms of UFC, because UFC did not promote him on the main shows. They promoted him on kind of like the sub shows, right? The sub UFC from Fox and all that sort of stuff, right? So he wasn't on the main cards for quite some time, with the exception of one fight, I think. So it wasn't until like, I don't know, the beginning of last year that he kind of jumped onto the main card shows, right? I think, just skipping into this sort of conversation, that he basically talked himself up to the title fights in the end without really fighting proper top talent. That's my opinion. I don't think he ever really deserved the Aldo fight in the first place. Forget the fact that he won. I don't think he deserved it. He didn't really. There's probably other guys that he could have fought to kind of really get up there. But anyway, we're talking about Conor McGregor's confidence. Now, you look at the way that Conor McGregor's style has changed over the years, and it's because of his confidence. Now, he was a counter-punching or a counter-striking fighter, and he kind of perfected that, and it worked so well for him. But then over the course of the last couple of years, where his name and his stock has increased, partly because of the way that he's promoted himself, his opponents, I think, have become slightly scared of him, right? They've become slightly scared of him, and that has changed his style. He has changed his style, and his fights on the front foot now, and his fights are more slower pace. It's more of a plodding style. It has changed. So what you need to think about is that Mayweather, he can counter like nobody, right? So maybe the fact that McGregor now fights on the front foot, or he has done in recent fights, that will play into Mayweather's hands. He'll be able to kind of see what's happening in front of him, and it'll be to the Mayweather style. But then maybe he'll go back to the style that he previously adopted, because this is now a boxing match, and he'll find a counter. And we know that when you never really get great fights when you've got two guys that want to counter. It just doesn't really work. And I don't think that Mayweather is ever going to change it. I don't think he's going to go on the front foot. I think he's always going to be the counter in this sort of battle. So that's another thing to think about in this matchup. Now, the last thing to really think about here is the money. Now, I've read a lot of stuff here about the money, and you got McGregor basically saying, "Oh, I'm bringing all the money, and I've made UFC 400 million," and all this sort of stuff, which is all well and good. And I think one of the things I heard him say was that Mayweather can't fight anyone else where he would make this sort of money, and that is 100% true, because Mayweather has fought pretty much anyone of note in all of the 3 or 4 divisions that are around his weight, with the exception of people that are coming to the fore now. So younger guys that don't really have the resume. They kind of get into the top, but they don't have a great resume. Mayweather's resume is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. People can argue and say he didn't fight people in the prime and all that sort of stuff, but at the end of the day, when we look back in history, we're not going to be thinking about the fact that he did not fight Pacquiao in 2009 and he didn't fight these guys whenever. We're just going to look back at his career and we're going to say, all right, so in that time frame, he fought Berto, he fought Pacquiao, he fought Madonna twice, he fought Alvarez, Guerrero, Cotto, Mosley, Marquez, Hatton, De La Hoya, Judah, Gatti, like all these guys. He's gone through, and the fact that he's gone up weight classes as well. But he does not. What I'm trying to say is that these young guys don't bring the money. The money that he made for the Pacquiao fight compared to the money he made for the Berto fight, even though that was promoted as his retirement fight, he made peanuts for the Berto fight in comparison. And that's the fact. And the fact is the Pacquiao fight was a letdown, primarily because it wasn't a great fight, but also the fact is a lot of people put that up on a massive pedestal, like it was going to be the greatest matchup in history of boxing. And we can compare that to taking it back to heavyweight just for 1 second in this thing. David Haye versus Klitschko. That fight was a terrible fight, okay? But what made it even worse was that so many regular or casual fans were kind of saying, this is going to be amazing. David Haye's fighting Klitschko. This is going to be brilliant. Everyone bought box office, pay-per-views and all that. And it didn't light up. It wasn't the exciting match that people thought it was going to be. And somehow something's telling me that if this matchup ever happens, Conor McGregor, Floyd Mayweather Jr., I think it's going to stink the gaff out. That's what I think. I think either nothing will happen. It'll be one of those one-sided Floyd Mayweather wins over 12 rounds, or Mayweather knocks him out. That's what I can only ever see Mayweather winning this fight. That's the problem. I don't mind Conor McGregor, as I kind of alluded to just a few moments ago. I think he's got to become the most famous and the biggest money fighter in UFC off his name. And I like it when guys promote themselves in this sort of fashion. Makes it more exciting. But in terms of ability and CV, Conor McGregor doesn't have it. Just doesn't have it, apart from obviously the Aldo fight. But that's that. But anyway, I think this fight is only ever going to go one way or two ways. Mayweather knocks him out fairly early, or it goes the full 12 rounds and it's a comprehensive boxing masterclass by Floyd Mayweather. So that's my video. I think I went on for a while about this. It's just something that's been playing on my mind, particularly the last couple of days. And if you've got anything you want to talk about, any comments, any interest you have in this MMA versus boxing clash, what's your prediction? You know where to go. It's the comments section below, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. So I've been Teekosey, and this has been a special with just 15 defeats.